All right, Daniel chapter 3. So I started this week seeking to answer one question. Now you look in your Bibles, you guys are like, hey, this is the fiery furnace, the Nebuchadnezzar golden image, fiery furnace passage. You know, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they got thrown in there, and there's the fourth guy, and you're like, oh yeah, I totally know the story. And I've heard the story about 4 bajillion times. Maybe parents have used it for your kids. If you do that one more time, I'm throwing you into the fiery furnace, and Jesus won't be there with you. Maybe it's gotten that bad for you. I don't know. We have not done that yet for our kids. They've not hit that milestone of furnace throwing, but I think they've been pretty close. So I started this week seeking to ask one question, and that was, what type of furnace did Nebuchadnezzar use to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into? I was determined that I could figure this thing out. And I have concluded with in my mind, a 75% chance that it is what I said it is. But I'm going to tell you in the middle of the sermon, so you got to pay attention. So I believed I answered this question, and as I began to study the passage of Daniel chapter 3, I kept reading through it, and as I studied and tried to figure out what type of furnace it was, and the type of culture that was going on back then, and what is exactly playing out here, that something was really brought to my mind, and it was one of those truths that you read and you hear about it, and maybe it's been said in the past, or you've heard it, you thought about it, and then you actually really start understanding exactly what it means. And it really seems that God used this fire to prepare his followers for greater things. And it really seems like God used this fire to prepare his followers for greater things. And I don't know about you, I have only been on fire one time in my life. And it was not a pleasant experience. It's not something I would wish on anybody. I was roasting marshmallows. And my marshmallow caught on fire. And I lifted it up and tried to shake that marshmallow off. And, they tell you you're supposed to stop, drop, and roll in any sort of fire situation. Yeah, I think they need to tell you that more, because I proceeded to run around like a maniac instead. Because I figured that would put out the fire. My dad had to catch me, put turn on, etc. So fire has a lot of benefits, but when you think to yourself, he uses fire on me to do greater things. How about we just leave the fire alone, and how about we use cold water? God uses cold water to prepare me for do greater things. It's not what happens. And here in this account of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we will see a couple of ways that God used this fire in his servant's life. So let's get going on it. So Daniel chapter 3, verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. That is pretty much 90 feet by 9 feet. If you think about that, that is one of the weirdest statue things ever. That's really tall. Like a giant post, sort of. Okay? And so he makes this giant statue, this image, and he set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. And then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. I used to think that this was a giant statue, up until the fact that it'd be the weirdest shaped man ever. Because 90 feet by 9 feet, that is sort of skinny. Really, really, really skinny. So what I think it is a a large post of stone, etc., that was set up, and then probably on top of it was the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. It does not say that the image was of King Nebuchadnezzar. I know it's been told, King Nebuchadnezzar got inspired by his last dream, and so he decided to make, a gold image of himself. There's nothing in the text that supports that. It is just an image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. The Bible leaves it vague on purpose. We don't exactly know what it is, but he sets up this image, and he sets it up on this large, tall post, and he brings all the officials, all his advisors and wise men, the leaders of the city and the country there to the dedication. And so he says in verse 3, then the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, and the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And therefore, as soon as the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up." And so what we see here right now is that King Nebuchadnezzar made this announcement to everybody there, to all the officials, that anytime you hear this song, everyone is to together symbolically bow down and worship this image. And we don't really see where this is played or when the song decides to play or when it's supposed to happen. But everyone knows that when this music begins to play, everyone together is supposed to get down and to worship this image. Or they're going to get thrown into a burning, fiery furnace. And therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down before and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace." So this is why I don't think it was the image was of him, was because of "and worship the golden image." And they never say "and worship your golden image." Your image. It is the golden image you have set up. And I probably think it's of Moloch or one of the big wigs. We don't exactly know. But that's why I don't think it was of him or his head or anything like that. It was of one of the people he worships. And it says, "There are certain Jews," verse 12, "whom you've appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. And so they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" So here, Nebuchadnezzar's like, okay, Nebuchadnezzar's pretty mad, but maybe, just maybe, these three individuals, they were a little too close to an explosion, and so they didn't hear, properly. Maybe, maybe they just talked too loud, or maybe they were traveling, or maybe that was the day they slept in. I'll give you guys another chance, okay? And so when you hear this music, I want you to bow down and worship like you're supposed to do. If not, I'm going to throw you into the fiery furnace. And what God is going to be able to save you? So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. And then Nebuchadnezzar said, all right, that's cool. Whew. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Parents, you probably know this expression well. You've used it to all of your kids. It's that look of, oh, that's so cute too. Oh, I'm going to kill you. You guys know what I'm talking about? If not, you've never had kids. Because there's this change in expression where your kids, they know I'm going to get it. And they know no matter what they say, their doom is at hand. And then oftentimes your kid decides to take off running because just maybe I can escape the wrath. But you know how that works out. You know that look, okay? You know that look that happens, and his face changes. And he looks and he says, he ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it is usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. And then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments. They were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. God uses his fire to prepare his followers for greater things. That sounds sort of messed up. Here, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they faithfully served their God, and they got thrown into a fire. I don't like this sermon already. I don't like where this is going. So, it's a couple points to show you. See, so God used this fire to prepare his followers for greater things. And the first, there it goes. Okay. Point number 1 is God creates fiery situations that allow purity to come from impurity. And you guys are like, okay, Pastor, you're talking some weird stuff here. Well, if you guys remember the name of the sermon, it's God's Metallurgy. Like I said, I was determined to figure out which furnace we're thrown into. So everything is going to take this theme, okay? So, because I thought it was fun. So God creates fiery situations that allow purity to come from impurity. This is called smelting. See, smelting means to melt ore in order to separate the metal contained. And in order to melt ore, you have to use fire. In order to produce something good, you have to heat it up. And the hotter it's heated, the more it melts through. So this is what happens to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in this situation. So if you guys look at verses 1 through 6, where King Nebuchadnezzar comes and he makes an image of gold, the story gives us this account. Daniel gives us this account of what's going on. The King Nebuchadnezzar has this awesome idea of making this giant statue, and everyone is supposed to fall down and worship. It is going to be something that brings together a sense of national pride and national unity. This right here is going to proclaim to the world how unified we are. As the sound of this wonderful song, we all in unison get down on our hands and knees and pay homage to this. Brilliant idea. This is the situation that we have. This, in essence, is the furnace. Because we didn't know this until we actually get a little bit further, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego decide to say no because they are not going to worship this image because they worship the one true God. They didn't realize it, but God had allowed the situation to happen, and God grabbed them and, in essence, had placed them inside this furnace. Inside a situation that was bound to get really, really hot. Has there ever been a time in your life where you've been placed in a fiery situation? Something that was about to get a little more complicated, and it had really nothing to do originally with you, but it sort of happened. Maybe your boss just starts having some really bad days, and you don't realize it at times, but your boss is now getting really, really mad at you. Really, really angry with you, and you really don't know why. You really don't know what's going on with that person. Or husbands, have you ever been married to somebody, and for some reason, things just seem to be a little off? with your wife, or vice versa. And little do you know, she's pregnant. Whoops, okay. Or maybe wives, your husband comes home and he's getting grouchy every single day. And he's been going through something tough and you don't really understand what's going on. But you've been placed in this situation that is getting tense. It's getting frustrating. How do you respond in this situation? This is the furnace. You guys look at this. This is a picture of a furnace. I think, it changed. Okay, good. All right, so if you guys see here, the screen was white and it got changed. I don't know how that happened. Anyways, okay, so right here says copper, charcoal, and iron ore gets placed into the furnace. See all those dots and stuff? You guys can see this image, right? For the most part. Sorry, it's dark. I don't know what happened there. Right here is the results. There's the impurities, and this is where the air gets pumped in. This is a very basic furnace. They're a little more complicated than this, but the basic idea is that you stick the iron ore, which was very rarely did it ever come out pure out of a mine, was this ore mixed with rock, and you go and you throw it in here with whatever was going to heat it up. And then as you heated it up with air, that the copper melted to the bottom. And then as they got more and more advanced, they were able to bring the impurities out. So you started having pure copper or pure iron or tin or whatever other metal they had. Sort of makes sense right now? Okay, I want to make sure. So we are placed, in essence, in a furnace when these situations start happening. Like it literally happening. We have been, unbeknownst to ourselves, we're like, things are starting to get hot. Things are starting to get difficult. Things seem to be heating up a little bit. Well, we're going to find out that actually produces something. Now, a furnace needs fire, all right? And there are a couple of things in this situation that are fueling this fire. Look at verse 7. It says, therefore, as soon as the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. One of the fires in this fiery situation was a false religion. Now, that does not mean in your type of furnace situation or your fiery situation that false religion is a part of it. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean, but doesn't necessarily mean that. But in this circumstance, we have a false religion that is heating things up. And as a result of this false religion and the idea that they have to bow down and worship this image, this started creating something a little more tense. And they were going to be fighting it. You have friction and you have fire that starts happening. Well, what also you're fighting is the national and individual pride. Which, as you guys know, stepping on someone's pride, you can generate all sorts of wonderful reactions. If you have any questions about that, just turn on the football games today and just watch a bunch of guys get mad at each other and watch their pride get stepped on all the time. They run into each other with helmets and pads. It's a blast. It's terrible. It's so much fun to watch. Okay. But you have all this national individual pride where, see, the whole nation is supposed to come together. I mean, this is a sign of unity of the nation. See, as soon as all peoples heard this, all peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden image. See, this was a symbol of national pride. And here's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego hating Babylon. They should just go move to another country. Here they are. Could you imagine how awkward that would be, though? It'd be like they start playing the music, and they're just walking down the street, and everybody stops what they're doing and bowing, and they're like, oh boy. They're not standing. We don't know how they stood. Do they sound like this? I don't know. We usually didn't bow down, and everyone else is. Can you imagine they'll look like, this is when you're supposed to bow down. And they don't. And then when they get before Nebuchadnezzar, remember how his face changed and how mad he was? See, Nebuchadnezzar was even being gracious to them and giving them another chance to do it. And here they are, and they pretty much tell him, O king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. Verse 17, if this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace, and will be able to deliver us out of your hand. Whoo! You don't say that to a king. You can't say, you can't get me, king, because then they most likely got you. And that's pretty much what they said. So here they are. They have stepped on individual pride and national pride, and the situation is now going to get very, very hot for them. So how hot is this fire going to get? And it sort of depends on how you react to the situation. Verses 16 through 18, Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, they had this chance. So they're in this furnace and it's starting to heat up. See, if they had responded, okay, we'll bow down, what would have happened to that fire? The situation would have just calmed down. Nothing would have happened. Am I right? I'm like, okay, all right, I'm such a nice king. They bow down, the situation really doesn't get too hot. But see, if the situation didn't get hot, then nothing is produced because it's not getting hot enough. Well, they decide to say, no, we're going to trust in our God. And if we die, we're still going to trust in our God and we'll just be in heaven. See, but what Nebuchadnezzar does is Nebuchadnezzar actually heats it up 7 times what was normal. To us nowadays, we sort of get that. Turn on the oven, 300 degrees, 450 degrees. I mean, we can do that with a turn of a knob. Pretty simple. Back then, it wasn't so easy. Back then, you had to have containers that could hold it. And you had to heat it up, and you had to get people close enough. You had to be able to get enough air in there because it's burning pretty hot. I mean, there was a lot of complications back then. They didn't have blast furnaces and stuff like they do now. So there was 2 types of furnaces that they had, industrial-sized furnaces that would have actually been able to fit 4 individuals in this place. One was a metal furnace. It's called a bloomery, but bloomeries are typically a little smaller. This was actually big because it has to fit 4 people, okay? A bloomery you can typically put your leg in that would not have been hot enough to kill, 3 people. So it's probably an industrial size. The other type of furnace is one called a kiln. Any of you guys ever made pottery back in the day? And you got to stick it in there in the kiln and it turned out all shiny and you gave it to your mom and you're all so happy. And your mom probably still has it. My mom still has my kiln projects because they are that awesome. Yeah, okay. So this is just an example, but oftentimes kilns could get big enough. They just sort of this is an example of one. There's lots of different kinds. You can Google it. There's a ton. But this whole thing is pretty much nothing but mud bricks. And they put all the fire inside and they heat it up and they go. And then after a result, you have a bunch of bricks. And yay, they have them, okay? But oftentimes when they make bricks, they actually had the temperatures pretty well regulated because they wanted to create exact bricks every single time. So it's possible it was it, but I don't think they could have heated that 7 times hotter than what they normally did because they didn't need to. They never made kilns designed to heat up 7 times more. It just wouldn't make any sense. So that is why I hold to that they were actually thrown into a metal furnace. So if you guys look at this, so metal, iron ore melts at certain temperatures where it starts going out. Tin at 495 degrees. Copper at 1,984 degrees, and iron at 2,800 degrees. It's pretty hot. Now, if you guys are doing your math, you're probably trying to figure this out, but if you guys look at this, so most of the time furnaces, they were designed to do all 3 because you create the container, you pour the stuff out, runs. Well, tin, they were very common. They used tin and they used copper all the time. Because if I didn't realize this, but bronze is actually made out of mostly copper and a little bit of tin. Some of you guys are like, duh, pastor. Learned that in 3rd grade. Well, I didn't. And so you have bronze. Now, what's really fun is during the Bronze Age, they could not get their furnaces heated hot enough to melt the iron. It became very, very expensive to make iron, which is why the Bronze Age lasted as long as it did. And why you have certain gaps. And down in Africa, they had harder wood, which harder wood burns hotter. And then eventually they started figuring out how to do charcoal and a variety of other things. They figured out how to get it hotter. And so they could actually then lead into the Iron Age because it became easier to heat stuff up. You tracking with me so far? Nations typically did not like to trade tin to countries because if you traded tin to countries, what you're in essence doing is giving that country the capability of making bronze armor, bronze weaponry, etc. They didn't like to trade tin. So if there was any sort of national problems, tin was not being traded. It's the same thing as oil today. The last thing you want to do is trade your enemy something that they can use to fuel their weapons. Last thing technically you want to do is give the United States lots of oil because we've got tanks. You just don't do that. It's sort of one of those things. So if nations start having issues, oil is one of the first things to go. Same thing here. Tin was one of the first things to go because if tin was cut off, you stop making bronze. Now, iron and carbon actually produces steel. So this is what's really fun about this. So 7 times hotter. Tin, so let's just say 500 degrees. Okay? What's 500 times 7? 3,500 degrees? Okay? So if the furnace was designed to be able to get hot enough to get iron, they didn't do it often because it was expensive. But if the furnace was mostly designed to do this, you could actually heat the furnace up 7 times hotter than it usually is. They didn't have exactly, so you can't say, well, that's not exactly times 7. Yeah, they really had thermometers, and they could go out, a little harder. All right, Nebuchadnezzar, it's 7 times hotter. Give me a break. But on average, multiply this by 7, you've got something that could actually burn iron, something that you could do with this furnace. You could design it. You guys check with me here? So I think it was an iron furnace. So because not only that, is they were also thrown into, look at verse 23, and these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Kilns were not made from the top. Kilns are typically made from here. It's really hard to fall like this. Okay? Especially when the 3 men died. All right? They most likely fell in to a furnace. You guys get it? So this really excited me. I was like, I finally figured out. I have now arrived as a pastor. I figured out what type of furnace it is. All right, so where am I? Am I saying 7, 5? Yeah, so you got 5 times hotter, et cetera. All right, 10 are melted. Got it. Nebuchadnezzar heated up. They fell in. All right. So, not yet. God creates fiery situations that allow purity to come from impurity. Now, this is what's really fun when it regards to this. So, as the situation in our life, and this is so, and I was telling Paxton this yesterday, that it seems like when I preach on these messages, certain messages like this, it's supposed to be my life as like a living illustration of these points. So it makes me scared of preaching, like end time stuff, I think. Because I'm like, this is what hellfire and brimstone look like. Things heat up. And you sort of have a response. And a lot of times we fight it. And we try to get away from the fire as fast as we possibly can. But what we fail to realize is that actually in hot situations, it actually produces something. Just as copper is produced when it is put through the fire and the impurities are sent out, the same thing happens in our life. Fiery situations remove the impurities from our life. And so often we fight them, and we just want our life to be nice and easy and simple and peaceful and nothing to ever go wrong. And when something does go wrong, it's clearly God's fault because he hates us. But the fact is, the fiery situations make us better. But you're thinking, Pastor, now, how do you think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego felt during this situation? They were literally thrown into a fiery situation. It wasn't like, I had problems at work. No, I got thrown into a fire pit, dear. Oh, that's nice. And in that conversation when they got home. So, all right, let's go on to the second one. All right, the second one is God. Oh, no, I don't want to read that point. Ha! You can't read that yet. Sorry, it's all according to plan. All right, verse 24. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? And they answered and said to the king, true, O king. He answered and said, but I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire. And they are not hurt. And the appearance of the fourth is like a son of the gods. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, could you come out and come here? Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps and the prefects and the governors and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of these men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. And then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So, once again, this is just my own kid imagination. I imagine that because I pictured a kiln, so, they sort of threw them in, the guards died, and then there was like risers, where Nebuchadnezzar and all of his people, they sat around and watched the fire. If it was thrown from up top, see, a lot of times I picture this happened instantaneously. Sort of what we did. Oh, wait, there's 4 guys there. How did that happen? Okay, but the fire would have to have died down a little bit. If they heated this up 7 times, what's the normal amount, and it killed the guards who threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in, Nebuchadnezzar couldn't have gotten close for a while. They were in that fire chilling for a little while. You guys think about that. Nebuchadnezzar, the only way he could actually start seeing in there is if he got close enough to see it. If he got close enough to see it, not a good idea. They were in that fire for a while. It wasn't like for 5 minutes. They were in that fire for a while, having a conversation with this 4th guy. It's pretty neat. It wasn't like 5-minute time. I don't know, how long does it take to unheat a stove? It takes a while, doesn't it? Yeah. This is 2,800 plus degrees. Think they just cool down in like 10 minutes? They just threw some water on it? No. They were in there for a while before Nebuchadnezzar could even get close enough to look. And so he saw it. And then he's trying to figure out how mad was I? Did we accidentally throw a 4th guy in there? 4? He's thinking he's going crazy already. That happened in another chapter. So here he goes, he throws them in, he's counting, and he has to ask somebody else, how many guys did I throw in there? And even they're like, well, you threw in 3. And he's like, I see 4. And so he's close to them, can you guys come out? And most likely they had a system where they actually had probably little steps, and they were able to come out, and they were able to get out of the fire. And they were actually sort of fine. It's pretty impressive. Because when I got caught on fire by a marshmallow, I screamed. They did not. Leads us to the second point. See, God has to heat up the fire to help you bond with the Lord. There's this fire again. Now, see, we're talking metallurgy again. And this is called alloying. This is called making an alloy. Man, I am like an expert at this metal stuff now. As I said before, so tin melts 495, copper melts 1,984, and iron melts, that hot. So in order to make bronze, you had to heat up both metals to this, because remember, bronze is tin and copper. In order to make bronze, you had to heat both metals up to this temperature. Because that way, they melted and they bonded together and you created bronze. And of course, there's proper ratios of, 8 to 2 and stuff like that. And to do iron, or to make steel, the same thing goes with iron and carbon. Too much carbon does this, not enough carbon does this. Just the amount of variety of carbon does this. And so there's all these ratios and stuff like that. You can figure that out on your own. But the fact is, in order to make something stronger, bronze is significantly stronger than tin and copper. You had to mix the two together. You had to heat them up. It's the same thing in regards to our bond with the Lord. We have to be heated up so we can be bonded with him. It's only through fire that we get heated enough that we actually listen. It's when our faith gets tested and our faith gets put on fire, and we actually struggle and melt that we actually bond closer with the Lord. It is through fire. Anybody who tells me they drew closer to God when everything was perfect is a liar. It is only through fire that we draw closer to the Lord. It is only through tough times that we draw closer. And I hate that because fire is lame and fire hurts and fire stings and fire's fire. This is what's fun. In the midst of the fire, you can know that you're never alone. See, the bond we see here is 3 parts brother, 1 part God. That was what was mixed there. And at times in your life, it's going to be one-on-one. It's going to be a situation of just you and the Lord. Other times, it's going to be you and your wife before the Lord. Other times, it's going to be you and your family are going to be tried and have to go. So there's different parts. There's different ratios. But just like with tin, aluminum, and a variety of other stuff, sometimes they change. And sometimes how God decides to bring people together. So for example, with a church, it could be 50-1. But God has perfect ratios and planned, and he brings families and individuals and churches and communities. He will bring them through and heat them up to the right temperature in order to draw them all together and draw them closer to the Lord. So what we're going through now as First Baptist Church, this is the exact temperature we're supposed to be in order to start drawing closer to the Lord. And at times it might be a little cooler. And at times it might get a lot hotter. But we can know that God is getting us to those temperatures to try and to test and to mold our faith to draw so we can bond with the Lord. And that's what happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They knew. See, they told the king, we know that God is able to save us from you. That's head knowledge. That's good. But until they act, you know how you can believe something and believe something, but until it actually happens in your life, suddenly that your perspective has changed. You realize, whoa, it deepens your understanding. That's what happened there. Yes, they believed it, that their God was able to do it, but then they got to live it out. It would have stressed them, it would have changed them, because in the midst of that moment, just as they were thrown in, human instinct is this is going to hurt, and there's nothing I can do. They'd have flinched, they'd have tensed up, they'd have waited for it. They knew what they did was the right choice, and it was happening. They thought they were going to die until they hit the bottom and they weren't screaming. And then they thought they were in hell. And then they wait, no, I'm not. Whoa. And then they had to count. And that's all the process of their faith that happened in the midst of that little tunnel. They suddenly realized, here's God. Could you just imagine, what would you even ask God in the midst of that situation? How hot is this? I don't know. What would you ask? What the conversation was? We have no idea what conversation we had. But we knew that God used this to stretch and mold their faith. And as a result of this, he created 3 people with incredible bonds to him. And we never hear about them again. We never hear about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego again. See, God had them for this one moment. And God has to heat up the fire to help us bond with the Lord. Now, so what are the results, though? Because we can talk about this. We're like, yeah, sounds really nice. I'll become more pure afterwards, or fine, I'll get closer to the Lord, but is there really anything else? Is there really benefit to this? And I think God shows us what ends up happening after this. Look at verse 26 and 27. So Nebuchadnezzar came near of the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps and the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not any power over the bodies of those men. I want to stop right there at that phrase. In life, nothing has power over us. Because through the person and the work of Jesus Christ, there is not anything here on earth that has power over us. You guys to really think about that. You have the indwelling Holy Spirit in your life. There's nothing that is going to happen to us. When we die, our mortal shell is gone and we are in the presence of Jesus forever. We don't ever lose. We have nothing to fear. This world has nothing on us, and the same thing is true with these guys. It says they saw that the fire did not have any power over the bodies of those men. See, even in the midst of being heated up and being stretched, ultimately that has no power over where we will one day stand. God is just using that to shape and to mold us. He's using those situations to heat us up. It says the hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. First one is you will end up stronger. You will end up more purified. You will end up purified on the other side. Of any fiery situation, you will end up purified on the other side. Even if you fight it, and God's going to still purify you. It's better to go with it. But God is going to purify you on the way on. Here they are. They got thrown in, bound and tied, and they got tossed in, and they came out unbound, and they probably smelled better coming out than they did going in. That's how cool this is. That's the significance here. They were purified in the process. They came out better. Just like iron ore that is smelted or copper, as it's gone through the fire, it produces something more pure. And the last one is others will benefit from the process. This is one of those where our life is on display points, and this is one of the ones where it happens often. But verse 28 through 30, Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God." So as a result of their fiery situation, others ended up praising God for it. "Therefore, I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way." And then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. See, sometimes God will have us go through the fiery situation for the benefit of others. One, that they will be able to see how God is working in your life. Did you guys notice that their faithfulness actually guaranteed the safety of the captive nation of Israel in Babylon? And there's not another reference to something bad really happening to them up until, was it Daniel chapter 6? And that was a whole other nation. But as a result of the fiery situation, the fiery furnace Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went through, there is not another reference of the people of Israel in any sort of danger or threat. God used their furnace to pretty much produce salvation and safety for all the other people. So sometimes the fiery furnace, it's difficult. It's tough. Not sometimes. It's tough. It is going to be hard. What ends up happening, though, is you will end up better on the other side. And also, others are going to benefit from the process. One, in how you're able to relate to somebody else. Those who have gone through the fiery furnace of cancer can relate and connect with people who struggle with cancer far better than those without. People who have gone through divorce and relationship situations can connect better with the other side. Those who have car issues, which is what I do all the time, I can connect with people with car issues. like a pro at it. But we can connect the bad things in our life. We can connect and benefit others, and we can help relate others. But sometimes what you're going through has a lot bigger picture. And there's out to the furnace experience that you have, you'll be able to pour out blessings upon others that you can't even imagine. I bet Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had no idea when the three of those guys stood and decided to walk through this scenario trusting the Lord, that they had no idea that as a result of their faithfulness, they were going to, 1, get thrown into a fire, 2, be able to stand up in that fire, 3, come out the fire better on the other side, 4, having to talk to God, and all the time. And then as a result of their faithfulness, it benefited the entire nation of Israel. You do not know what's going to happen as you go through the fiery furnace. We all have our furnace trials. We all have our fiery situations. See, God used this fire to prepare his followers for greater things. Don't run from the fire. Walk in it and trust the Lord. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the fiery furnace trial of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and what you're able to accomplish. God, now we have our own trials that we are walking through. We have our own scenarios. We have our own things that we struggle with. God, as you know, life is hard, and at times it heats us up, and we don't feel like we can make it another step. But God, you were so good. You brought those 3 through it, and you will bring us through our fiery furnace situations. What's fascinating, God, is if you decide to stop bringing us through the situation, we have the promise, God, that no fire has authority over us. No problem can control us. But God, at the moment that you decide to stop helping us is the moment we are standing in your presence. And we trust you, and we ask you to help us this week as we all walk through our challenges. God, we thank you for all that you do. We pray.